Hi, I'm Charles House, Director of Economic Development for the City of Westland. We're here on day one for the TIFA Design Workshop, and part of that workshop includes presentations from Robert Gibbs with Gibbs Planning. Bob's going to be talking about adaptive reuse and best practices for retail, and it's going to be a very interesting discussion, and we're looking forward to hearing what Bob is going to share with us. And with that, we're going to cut away to Bob.
Thank you very much for coming, and good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Robert Gibbs, and I'm one of the planners on the team here. We're one of the planners with McKenna Associates for the TIFA project in the Westland Mall area, and we're going to cover the new trends in shopping center development and planning and what's going on with the market. And first of all, we think Westland has been very fortunate for a long time having the shopping center here. It was one of the pioneering shopping malls in the country, and it's still a very viable and very successful center, and it's been an amenity for the community for a long time. The shopping center industry right now is competing with the internet, and it's competing fairly well. The internet still only accounts for about 7 or 8% of all retail sales, and 90% or more of retail sales are still occurring in real stores. And the millennials and a lot of the demographics, the empty nesters, retirees, young families, are still preferring to shop in a real environment where they can touch the sweater, they can look at the book, they can touch the gift, and actually buy it right on the spot so they can get that instant gratification and that reward. And a lot of the malls are still doing really well. There are a number of malls that are closing in the United States, but a lot of the malls are doing really well. And when you look at the sales per square foot, they're going up. On the other hand, about 25% of the malls are going to close in the next 5 to 6 years in the United States. But almost every case, those malls haven't had any investment for a long time, or they're in a very stressed location where no matter what the format is, they probably wouldn't be doing really well. There still are a number of new centers being opened. The Taubman Company is one of the leading shopping mall developers in the world, and they're based here in Southeast Michigan. And the Taubman's malls are amongst the highest grossing malls in the entire world. And they have demonstrated, the Taubman has demonstrated that people still like the convenience of shopping in an enclosed center where they can go from department stores or whatever. So the internet is only about 8% of total retail sales. So even though we read every day that everybody's shopping the internet, that's true, but they're still spending 92% of their real dollars in physical stores. There is a competition to the internet is to give an experience, what they call someplace fun to go. So that if you want to have a family activity on a Saturday afternoon or you want to go for a date, you can't really have a date on the internet too well. You double click and you have a pair of shoes and then that's it. And so a lot of cities, this is Charleston where we've been advising them for years, a lot of cities are finding that people like walking on sidewalks, they like seeing other people, and they like going shopping. Charleston has just been rated the #1 visitor destination in the world by Condé Nast magazine, and one of the reasons is it just has lots of great shops and lots of great restaurants to go to. There is something about being in an outdoor urban environment or in an enclosed mall that you just can't do on the internet. You know, this is the greatest show on earth when you can sit on the sidewalk and see all the cars and everybody going by. You can see what your neighbors are doing. And so restaurants are a great way of doing that. And so are grocery stores. Grocery stores, when they're located near a shopping district, increase the sales by 25%. So today's shopping center developers are putting in a grocery store. And the better retailers want to see a grocery store go in there because the grocery store brings people on a twice, 3 times a week basis. And when they have ice cream, they're not going to go shopping, but they'll do the shopping first and then they'll go to the grocery store. So it's really essential to do that. We found in our market study for the TIFA area that there is a strong demand for another quality grocery store. And that's something that we're recommending the city look at. Walkability is the buzzword that everybody likes right now. They like going into districts where they can walk around, especially millennials. A lot of the millennials were raised in the suburbs where there were no sidewalks. And as they've come of age, they want to live where there's sidewalks and where there's things to walk to. They like walking to a coffee shop or to a restaurant. And they also like working in walkable environments. And because of that, there's a new service that measures how walkable every place is in the United States. It's called the Walk Score. And this is an app you can get on your cell phone. And it will measure the walkability from 1 to 100, 100 being perfect. The Westland Mall area has an average walk score, a little above average of about a 65. And because it's measuring things to walk to. Now, it's not that walkable in the parking lot, there's not a sidewalk there, but there's a lot of things to walk to. You can walk to restaurants and department stores and coffee shops. And so because that, it's considered a fairly good walk score. The best retailers in the country today and the best real estate investment groups want to invest where there's a walk score of 80 or higher. And so when they decide if they're going to invest in a property today, they want to see that high walk score. And 80 or higher is pretty high. And we think it's very plausible that the Westland Mall area and really all of the TIF district could be elevated to have a walk score of higher than 80. There's going to have to be some micro things done, some sidewalks put in, some street trees, some connectivity between some of the various neighborhoods. But technically, this area we're studying can have a high walk score. The reason that the real estate investors and the office employers and the hotels and the retailers like to be in a high walk score is it has higher values. And this chart, it was done by the Brookings Institute, and it shows how home sales, retail sales, office rents, residential property values are all much higher when you have a walk score of 80 or higher. And this is what the real estate is building today. If Westland Mall were built today, instead of probably the early 60s, if it were 65. If the Westland Mall were built today, it would look like this. These are called town centers, and they include all the retailers that are in the Westland Mall, department stores and such, but they're 2 and 3 levels, and they include housing and office on the upper level, and they include streets. And the retailers, the better retailers now, really prefer when they get a choice to either go into a stable mall like Westland where there's great demographics around it, or to go in some sort of open air walkable place. These new town centers always have a very strong public realm. They have nice parks and nice sidewalks and nice gardens, and they're just really nice places to hang out. They always have major employment centers. They like to put office in there because the office workers support the retail. It's estimated that every office worker directly supports 25 square feet of retail and restaurant space. So if you can get 100 or 1,000 office workers, you can support a lot of retail. The town centers always have residential for obvious reasons. People live there, then they can shop more often than they go to the restaurants. And the residential is a whole lot of types of residential. It's everything from a mid-rise multiple family building to cottage homes and townhomes, etc. Very often in our town centers on the edges, we're putting in little cottage homes. These homes are very popular with empty nesters whom maybe want to downsize from a larger home or an older home, and where they don't have a lot of yard to maintain, and where they have a lot of close neighbors that can watch out for each other. The town centers always include some form of multifamily residential. And these can be condominiums, they can be apartments, and they always face streets. The parking is in the back, and these generate pretty strong densities. But in this kind of setting, the more people that live there, the better retail you have and the better place you have. So in this town center planning, we want a lot of people living there rather than maybe in a subdivision where you don't want a lot of people living there. They also include live-work townhomes. This is where you have a house that has the bedrooms upstairs, and on the first level, it has an office or a retail shop. So a lot of people are working at home right now, or they're starting a hobby business after they retire. And this is a way of living upstairs like in the old way and having a shop on the first level. And the town centers are always including hotels now. And there's two reasons for that. First of all, the hotels bring a lot of shoppers to the restaurants. And every night or every couple of nights, you get new people with new fresh credit cards, and they like to go to shop and they like to go to restaurants. The other reason, though, is the hotels are more successful when they're in town centers. People now like, when they travel, to stay in a hotel where they can go out the front door and they can go and choose from restaurants or they can go shopping. And a lot of, especially business travelers right now, don't necessarily want to stay in an interstate interchange where they have to sit and watch CNN, nothing against CNN, but they have to sit and watch the news all night. And they prefer to be able to walk in a safe environment. So when you go to the national shopping center conferences, all the hotels are there saying, please let me in your town center. This is probably this is the latest, and I think probably one of the nicest town centers in the country. It's Avalon, and it's by Atlanta in Georgia. It's about 4 years old, and this is the way the new shopping centers are being built today. They always have a street. They always have on-street parking. They always have a beautiful square or plaza, and the buildings are between 3 and 5 stories tall with residential above. The market has found that these apartments rent for much more than apartments that are out in a park-like setting. That there are a lot of people now that prefer to live in a walkable town center where they can go downstairs and they can go to shops and restaurants. So this is a double win. The town center, the retailers benefit by having the housing, and the housing benefits by having the retail there. So where these are built, these tend to be the highest renting apartments in the market. And we, working with McKenna, we've done market studies that indicate there are thousands and thousands of people living in Westland that want to stay living here when they want to downsize, but they want a new kitchen and a new bathroom and something that's a little more compact. So we think there's a very, very strong in this market for this sort of home. Avalon includes a beautiful town square, beautiful shops, beautiful streets, and these town squares tend to become the real center for the community. It's where you have your holiday festivals and you have your parades and all of that starts. They always have a little lawn panel, and they tend to be surrounded with shops and restaurants. We also like to build squares and parks and greens in these town centers, and the greens are always faced with housing or shops. So these townhomes have the parking in the back, and there's no garage in the front, and so when you live here, you get a beautiful view of the park. And the other advantage is that the park is a lot safer because you have people living 24 hours a day looking out the window, making sure the park is safe. So both support each other. There are a number of town centers that are being built all over the country. This is one on a very small scale that we planned in northern Michigan by the Interlochen Music Camp. And this was a township, Green Lake Township, that just had strip shopping centers. And they wanted a walkable town center. It's way up in northern Michigan. And so we planned a neighborhood with little shops and little restaurants, and it's filled with cottage homes and little townhomes. This is a little view, a part of the neighborhood. This sort of walkable environment is what about half of the home buyers really want today, and it's about what about 3/4 of the millennials want. It's not for everybody. About half of the home buyers are perfectly fine living in a subdivision on a big lot, and that's great. But about half of the buyers want something like this. This is a very small scale village we planned by Petoskey, Michigan on Walloon Lake. And this is a community that has a population of 276 people. It might have one more, might 277. And, very little community. They wanted a town center here. This is where Hemingway lived when he was a young boy. But the whole town had been burned and razed. And so we proposed a little town center with a square, a street, restaurants and shops and cottage homes. And this has gotten built very, very quickly. And this has now made Walloon Lake an even more popular place. And we put in little cottages, little cottage homes. To make it feel authentic, we bought homes that were being torn down, historic homes that were being cottages, and we moved them into the village and turned them into shops. Because as much as we try, we can't make a new home look as good as an old home. So this is the hotel. It has a little inn and little shops and restaurants. And the benefit of doing something like this is that the surrounding property values are more desirable, and you get a great sense of placemaking where you can go and do something. This is the town center we're planning for the city of Troy, Michigan. Troy is a very beautiful suburb in Oakland County. It has lots of offices. In fact, more people work in Troy than live in Troy. So it has a lot of offices. But the brokers told the city that they're having a hard time leasing the offices in Troy because the major employers want to move downtown Detroit or to a downtown like Plymouth or Birmingham, because the young geniuses they hire, the 20-year-olds out of Stanford and MIT, don't want to work in a suburb. They want to work in a walkable environment. So the city hired us to plan a walkable town center for good business reasons, because it'll help them maintain employers and hotels, but also because a lot of their community is aged, and they want, a lot of the people of that age want to live in a walkable environment. This is the little square that we proposed, and it has a library or a future civic building at the end, and then this is the master plan. This is the city hall on the project, which we're reskinning with a new elevation. This is the first town center built in the north cold climates. It's in Cincinnati, Ohio, Easton Town Center. And up until about 20 years ago, everybody thought town centers would only work where you had a perfect climate, like in San Diego. And they didn't think anybody would shop outside if it was cold or where it snows. And so Easton broke that rule. They built in Columbus, Ohio, where it snows. And they broke all sales records. And research has now shown that when you build an open-air center where it snows, that you have higher sales than in California or Florida, because on a beautiful day, in a cold climate, nobody wants to go inside. They want to shop outside. This is Birkdale Village. This is in Charlotte, North Carolina. And this is also a town center where you have housing on top of retail surrounded by shops. This is Birkdale's housing. This housing was designed for single professionals in their 20s, and it has been invaded by 60 and older empty nesters whom have wanted to downsize, and they want to live in a walkable place like this. So if you're a single 60 or older person in Charlotte, this is the best place to go and get a date. You can go into the Starbucks, and within about a half hour, you're guaranteed to have at least a couple of opportunities to date somebody. This is the village of Rochester that we planned in Rochester Hills, Michigan. This was an enclosed mall called the Meadowbrook Mall. It was about 500,000 square feet, and it went through some hard times, and it lost all of its tenants except Ladies Foot Locker. Ladies Foot Locker is the last tenant to leave a mall. They do really well, and they tore the mall down in this case and built a little Main Street center. This was the Meadowbrook Mall. It was a beautifully designed mall, but it just had a hard time competing. Now, Westland Mall, when it was built, really was the state of the art. It is a really excellent location for a regional center. The density is really strong. You have lots of age variety from young families to young professionals to empty nesters. And it's very, very well located. And we think the center has, it's one of the centers that we think has a very long-term potential to remain a very vibrant shopping center. And it has a number of new retailers on the outside. It's very, very well managed. It has some excellent retailers and restaurants in the center. And our market study indicates that this is one of the malls that'll be around for a long time. And it probably just needs a little bit of polishing here or there. The interior of the mall is really beautiful, and it attracts a lot of people from quite a ways. It was built, of course, with a Sears, a Macy's, probably that was a Hudson's originally, and it has added a Kohl's and other retail shops. The center is very attractive on the inside and the outside, and we think that it has that great potential. We are also looking at the properties around the mall, including Westland Crossings to the east, which is a shopping center, which I just learned used to have a cinema at one time. It actually had a Yamasaki-designed cinema. Yamasaki is the famous architect that designed the World Trade Center. And it has retail on the other side. So we're studying all of the TIF area, which probably goes for a good mile, a mile and a half. It's a large area. But we're also studying in detail, the city has asked us to study in great detail these three primary areas. Westland Crossings to the east of Wayne Road, north of Warren, is a kind of a conventional shopping center from the 1960s. It's not enclosed, of course. It now has a credit union, I think, on the vacant site. But the center has a lot more parking than is really needed today. The center originally had a cinema, so it had to have this much parking. But the new centers that are being built today, if Westland Mall were built today, or if the Crossings were built today, it would have about half of the parking that it has right now. And that's a great opportunity for us planners, because we think there's opportunities to infill some development in the parking lots. We did do a market study, and I'm not going to go in detail on the market study tonight, but we did find that it's a very, very vibrant area, and the center right now can support about 70,000 square feet of new retail in addition to what's there already. And if built, that would generate about $28 million in new sales every year. It can support, yes, a grocery store, specialty food stores, a brew pub, some clothing stores, office and gift, and specialty goods. Our research found that Westland residents like to eat out a lot, and that you eat a little bit more than the average household does. So for some reason, you guys really like to go out and eat a lot, and you're not shy about doing so. We found that the site can support about 74,000 square feet of 7,400 square feet of additional restaurants, and about 60,000 square feet of additional retail. This is a project that we have been working on with Mall and Polozoides in California. This is another mall that was built almost in '66, I think, right after the Westland Mall. A lot of malls copied Westland Mall and Northland Mall after it was open. And this is a mall in California. The demographics are fairly similar, even though it's California, the demographics and incomes and ages are about the same as Westland. And it too had a lot of parking, although it was located on an interstate. And we were asked by the developer, the new buyer of the mall, to predict what it could look like 30 or 40 or 50 years from now. And the mall is anchored with 4 department stores, Macy's, a Sears, a Penny's, and I think they have a Nordstrom. And we came up with a long-range plan of what the center could look like, but we phased it so that it could be phased in very small increments. This is the existing mall right now. The red building is where a department store is that just closed. And the mall management tried for several years, and they couldn't find a new department store to go there. So they told us probably you can look either at putting in office in the department store, maybe some sort of housing, or we can look at another use. So one of our models was to replace the department store with 5 little blocks, and each block would contain some housing and a little bit of retail. The management liked that idea because they thought having 500 or 600 more apartments on the site would bring life to the center. We also did a study of what you could do with the surplus parking to the lower left, still keeping the mall operating as a great mall. And this is how we could infill the surplus parking with the blocks. And then we just did a series of models of what could happen over the next half a century and how it could be turned into a town center. Now, we feel the Westland Mall is a very viable mall, and so we're going to look at plans where we can keep the mall, of course, the way it is, and then try to put in some infill uses on some of the surplus parking. And we'll have to work with the mall management and the tenants to make sure that we're not taking away parking spaces that are really essential, so that on the day after Thanksgiving and all those busy days that everybody can still park there. We like to work on a block system where we design blocks that are in the old-fashioned Jeffersonian grid. And the blocks, because we're not good, we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know what is going to be popular 10 years from now. So we designed the blocks so that they can handle all land uses. They can accommodate a community building, apartments, cottage homes, offices, hotels. And so when we work on the plan, we'll be working, this is a mole and polozoides sketch, we'll be working on a plan that shows some future blocks where they could be located, keeping the existing parking lots, and then designing the blocks so that they'll go right into the mall and right into the shopping centers. So a block from this view might be the front entry to the mall, or might be the entry to one of the department stores. So it's really, the new thing is to sort of do a combination of where you have a great regional mall and then you connect it with a little bit of outdoor urbanism. This is one of the tricks that we like to use, where we build little shallow buildings, one-story shallow buildings, that keep the retail frontage so you have a walkable street, but then we keep the parking lots in the back. So it's not that walkable when you have a sidewalk facing parked cars. But if the sidewalk faces coffee shops and gift shops and whatever, then it's a lot more walkable. You will see in our plans proposals for these are called liner retailers because they line the parking lot. We'll be developing eventually some sort of new zoning called a form-based code, where we will recommend shapes of buildings but not specify what's inside the building. So the shape of the building may be an office, it may be a dentist, it may be a shoe store, it may be a restaurant, but we'll design it so that the shape of the building creates a walkable place. But then it gives the industry flexibility to build what's realistic. This is an interesting center in Lakewood, Colorado, that was an enclosed mall built in the early 70s that this is the original mall, that was turned into a walkable town center. This is the street right now. And this took about 20 years to do because they wanted to keep the mall, they kept the mall, but eventually they made it into a little mixed-use walkable center. And this is the latest right now. This is in a mall in Tampa, International Plaza. This is about 10 years old right now. And this is a Taubman mall where they kept the mall with the internal hallways. They put some of the retailers on the outside, like the Kohl's, and that's happened in the Westland Mall. And then they built a little pedestrian main street by the main entry of the mall, so that if you want to be outside, you can go outside and you can go to coffee shops and restaurants and stores, or you can go inside. And this is called a hybrid town center regional mall concept. And these really work well because these little walkable villages can be built in the excess parking, and they give the mall owner a chance to appeal to the tenants that want to go in a mall, which are most tenants, or if the tenant doesn't want to go in a mall, it lets them locate at the mall site, but with an outdoor setting. So it's really a way of having it both ways, and each one reinforces itself. The mall reinforces the outdoor street, and the outdoor street brings more people into the mall. If you look carefully on the top here, this is the mall with the department stores, and is at the top, at the entry of the mall, is the little Main Street, which has been grafted to it. This is a really great way of redeveloping an older center without tearing it down, which I think would be a mistake, and but still having the best of both worlds. Having a little bit of walkable urbanism. You can put housing here, hotels here, offices here, and this is just one, but there's really literally dozens and dozens of malls that are being turned this way. So we feel that this is an excellent site, that it has a very long-term viability. There are a number of retailers we think that will come here. Sure, the mall could use a little freshening up probably, but that's true with all commercial properties. And we're going to look at ways of infilling some of the excess parking, and we'll work with the management to see where that is, and to see over the long run how we can create something that's even more viable, that serves both the mall and the surrounding community. This is a book that I've written, Urban Retail, that describes how to do this. These are other books that I've contributed to, and we're the Gibbs Planning Group, and we're here with the McKenna Associates. So thank you very much. Be happy to take some questions.
You talked about earlier, obviously the mall, it's private ownership. How can the city, I guess, work with them using our TIFA dollars or working with a private and corporate partnership, I guess? How can we work with them since it's their property?
A TIFA organization is the perfect tool to work with the private and public sector, because the mall owner and the other shopping center owners, the other property owners, can report back to you what they need to remain viable and to expand, and then you can hire, you can develop a plan. I was going to say you could hire a consultant, but you've already done that. But you can develop a plan that meets the community's needs and makes the commercial property more valuable. And it's just a matter of working hand in hand. There's usually a gap between what it costs to build really the great public realm. More than these things cost more than a strip center, but that's what the TIFA funds are for. And I think that the key is to make sure that what you're building both serves the wishes and desires of the community and whatever those values are, and that it reinforces the private property so that it'll have another generation of viability.
I guess my question on that would be, would the mall have to sell to the city or to the TIFA, or would the TIFA just pay for it, I guess?
No, the mall really wouldn't have to sell the property. The mall would be, usually the owner retains ownership, but sometimes they'll bring in a third party. But if the city's going to build a park or a square or streets, very often that has some sort of ground lease or becomes some sort of public. So it's probably not a good idea for the city to build a square or a park and then to have it completely owned by the private sector. That does happen a lot, and it works, but it might be better if it's true public realm. Okay. So yeah, these tools were not available in 1965. Okay, we hadn't done downtowns since the 1800s. So we sort of got out the old books. We're reinventing the way towns were built in the 1800s and the 1900s, and kind of combining the best of both worlds, the best of what you need to make a viable, and I'm pointing to the mall, but it's really all the commercial properties in the TIFA district. These principles can be applied to every commercial and every residential property in the TIFA district. We didn't talk about neighborhoods, but the new trend in neighborhoods right now is to have a little corner store or a coffee shop or a cafe where you can walk to from your house. And the new home builders, when they build new apartments or condominiums or subdivisions, the new home builders, instead of building a clubhouse, are building a coffee shop or a little sandwich shop, because that's what people like doing. So the McKenna and Gibbs team will be looking at ways of maybe retrofitting some of the TIF area to create little walkable neighborhoods. You know, maybe making a little minor change, adding a sidewalk or putting in a little park, or just doing something at a very micro level that can make it more walkable.
So, my name is Mike. Nice to meet you, by the way. I was a tenant inside of Westland Mall for 6 years. The number one question asked, where is the food court? Okay? So, I was located close to Kohl's. So when they walk in, I was center. I was pretty much an information desk. Yeah, if you go back to like that over top view, I'll show you where I was.
Okay. Well,
So I was literally just information desk.
Yeah.
Food, number one thing asked.
that's a great opportunity. I mean, that confirms what our research showed. Our research showed that Westland people are large consumers of food. And so that's a great opportunity. And that could be built in the mall, or it could be built,
was probably
next to it.
the number one question.
Great.
For inside the mall.
That's really encouraging.
And I know a lot of restaurants go away from inside of the mall and they go outside of the perimeter because obviously there's 30,000 cars
Yeah.
versus 30,000 foot traffic inside the mall. So that's a tough one. I don't know how that'll work with the Westland Mall.
Well, what I'm hearing is you were a tenant in the mall by a group, you had a great location, and one of the number one questions you were hearing was, where's the food court? Where can I get something to eat? Where can I get a soft drink or something like that? So that's, to us, that's a great opportunity. That shows that it is a vibrant mall. And, you know, when they built malls originally, they didn't put much food in them because the old adage was when they're eating, they're not shopping. And now people want to have something to eat, and they shop longer.
I think a lot of it's finger food, fast, quick.
Yeah.
A lot of people will get a pretzel because it was
Right.
quick, easy. I'm in a hurry.
Yeah.
Like a lot of millennials, they want something quick, good, and
Right.
and fresh, kind of like a Qdoba or a Chipotle. That's why they do so good. The hot and readies,
Yeah.
$5, grab and go.
Right, so-
it's we live in that I need it now type era. So more like snack finger food, I think would do great inside of Westland.
Okay.
And even, when you're doing a little walking shopping center, have more fast.
Okay,
food,
I'm
fresh.
going to repeat what you just said because people can't hear you. But what you were telling us is the biggest demand was for quick and casual food where they can get something and not have to sit down for an hour, but where they can eat something fairly quick. That's good for our shopping center developers because the less time they spend eating, the more time they spend buying. So, we'll have to balance that out. Thank you for those comments. Those are great. Anybody else? Yes.
To speak out on the behalf of senior citizens that I know, and I don't want to grab and go. I don't like fast food. I want a little bit better quality restaurant in there, and we did have some nice restaurants in there. I would like to, I've heard the same thing as him, though. Nothing to eat. I mean, that's really maybe top of the list. But we also lost all of the art that was within the 1966 opening of Westland Shopping Center. Very, very sad. That added to the atmosphere in there. We had the big fountain in the East Court. We had the Zodiac clock in the same court, the giraffes and whatever. Only thing that I know remaining, I might be wrong, and he's on the back side, which would be the northeast part, is the goose with the golden egg.
Okay. I'm going to repeat what I heard. What I just heard is an empty nester, early senior, that doesn't always want to have quick, casual food. They like to have a nice place where they can sit down and enjoy themselves and have a better meal. And there was a loss of a lot of fine art in the mall that maybe you'd like to see come back. And that's what we call the public realm. And the new centers today have sculpture and fountains and parks. That might be a good investment for the TIF district to look at building that public realm. And you're right, probably a lot of restaurants closed that were in the mall, and that's in part because there may not have been enough office to support them for the daytime. And so these new town centers are built with office and hotels and residential because that lets you have a higher quality of restaurants and goods. Now, the new thinking of the town centers, though, is more is more. So the more people that work there, the better the restaurants. The more people that walk around. The more people that live there, the more walkable and safer it feels. If you can have one or two hotels, that's even better. So we're going to be looking at the new old way of planning, where we put a lot of different uses in a very compact, walkable place. And hopefully, if we're successful, if we can attract some office, like I showed in Troy, a lot of the major employers now don't want to be in a beautiful office suburban park where they have a pond. They want to be where their workers can walk to restaurants and shops. It just all really reinforces itself. And the Westland community, this TIFA district, is an extraordinary opportunity because you have strong demographics, excellent transportation, great access, a world-class mall, and we have lots of parking lots that are too big. So we have lots of land that we can infill on. So that's our challenge, is how do we put all those things together to create really a public-private kind of partnership. Yes?
What banquet hall is getting built, how many people does it fit?
I don't know the details of the banquet hall, but the question was about the new banquet hall. Do you know the name of the hall?
Westland Banquet Hall Center?
Westland Banquet Center. So
Okay, Westland Banquet Center. Many of you probably know that Westland is getting a fabulous new state-of-the-art banquet facility, which is a great anchor. It will, I'm sure it'll be booked for years in advance for weddings and parties and business meetings. It will give office and employers a place to have a very professional meeting and to hold conferences. And what that tells us is they're going to generate probably a demand for one or two hotels, because you're going to have a lot of businesses, a lot of people having weddings and parties here. And it'll probably also support retail and restaurants. So it's really a great use to have that here. Plus you have the cinema nearby. So from our point of view, usually communities we work with don't have all of the assets that Westland has. Got the demographics, you've got the world-class mall, you've got a cinema, and we've got a lot of land. So that makes it easier for us, but it's still a hard job. So we're going to be working hard for the next couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months to see if we can pull something here that you like. Our process is a series of alternatives. We never come up with the right plan the first time. So we will develop a series of alternatives and present them to the stakeholders, to the community, to the elected officials and planning commission, and have you tell us what parts you like of each alternative, and then we'll go back and try to merge those together. So it's not a one plan kind of solution. We will do alternatives, test them with you, go back and redo them, come back and test them. We'll just keep working on it until we get something that meets the community's values and the economic realities of the property owners. All right, thank you very, very much, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Okay, great.